All right. Hope everybody's doing pretty good this Tuesday afternoon. I'm going to get started for us here talking about display ads and, as Google coins it, responsive display ads. All right, next. And again. So these new ad formats that Facebook and AdWords have come up with rely a lot on artificial intelligence, and they allow us to provide photo imagery or graphic images. The preferred format is photo images, multiple headlines, multiple descriptions, and then they're paired together to try to do the best at meeting the objective of getting conversions. So some of the benefits that we'll see out of these ads as we go through how they're made and what they look like is you fit way more formats and variations than you can get just by providing 5 to 7 static pieces of content. So on top of that, sometimes when we would launch a campaign, we would only have 1 or 2 creatives for that campaign. And in the display ad method of delivering, you want to deliver your ads anywhere from 4 to 10 times to achieve your result. By having dynamic visual and text assets, you keep people from getting creative fatigue and seeing the same ad over and over. And of course, when they do see the same ad, they quickly disregard it. So by using multiple sets of copy, you can even change the messaging around your product without excessive amount of work saying when and where you'll get that message in front of your client. And the last piece, which us as data-driven marketers really love, is the ability to see the data on how all the pieces of the ads perform. And that's down to the headlines, the descriptions, and the graphical content. And of course, when we look at that data, we can make better decisions to drive ROIs for these clients and these campaigns as we continue to run them. All right. I put together a video here that shows how many different formats get creative. And you'll see the imagery is changing. The headlines and the descriptions are being paired with different images, as well as the logo in different formats. These are just the key ad formats. Over the next couple of slides, I'll show you a few of the other ones, but you can see how many sizes are being filled by these various assets. Really, if you just look at the image resolutions as you see the video progress, it's fantastic and makes it a lot easier to ensure that you're fitting all the right placements that Google's capable of delivering their display ads without taking a graphic designer to create every one of these exact pieces. I think that's enough, Devin. We can probably go to the next one. So here's 2 more formats. I didn't just put together a video on these, but this is the AdWords native format and the text ads, where they'll actually squeeze text ads into the display format. Okay. And here's an example of what some of the ads look like in the video format. For those of you that are pretty experienced, you'll see these look a lot like HTML5 animated ads, because they're not truly video, but they're taking different graphic content and applying transitions and animations to make them appear as video. Not to confuse that with the fact that we are capable of including video assets too on the AdWords platform, not yet on Facebook. All right. So this slide demonstrates the way AdWords will provide feedback on the actual assets that you've built the ads with. And this is a good example because it is the same example ads that I just showed you. And just by the number of impressions and the click-throughs that take place on the ad, Google provides us really good feedback on what the users liked and what they click through on. So surprisingly, the outdoor deck patio image didn't do all that great. It's given a low performance grade. And the image of the bottom one of the exterior property of one of our clients did really well. And then you can see up above the lounge and living room area image also did very good for this ad. What this helps us do is when we do ad refreshes or launch new campaigns, come up with creatives that we know are effective to this audience. Again, if you're going to show similar ads to the same demographic, this is really good feedback and right in line with what we need to do on how to improve the ads and deliver a better ROI. Next. This is the same idea from Google AdWords, and it's showing you a breakdown of the performance of both the headlines and the descriptions. Pretty straightforward. You can see our worst headline was "Enjoy Senior Living at Summit," and our best was "Comfortable Senior Living." And again, we'll take this data, we'll provide it to the copywriters, and we'll ask them to write with an eye toward what worked well over this previous campaign. Okay. And here you get a breakdown of the ad performance. This is a relatively short run. This campaign, I believe, launched in Q2 and ran into Q3. And you'll see that the responsive search ad has a very high click-through rate, but not the highest only. And some of that is AdWords really likes the responsive ads, so they're going to give it more impressions. As you can see, it gave it much more spend and much more impressions. But as a baseline metric for click-through rate of 10%, you can see that this responsive search ad is doing much better than that 10% average. Okay. Devin, we'll go on to the next. This is a little video showing some dynamic ad examples for Whiteface Ski Area. The Facebook tool for previewing isn't quite as clean or slick as the AdWords one. So I just wanted to give you everyone an idea of how the different formats will come together. And I stand corrected because this is Facebook dynamic ad with the video format included as assets. So Facebook's kind of tricky in filling all of their creative needs, and these just do an exceptional job of filling most all of their different placements that you can. This is not the best example because I really love to use the 9:16 aspect ratio videos for the story format. And oftentimes that's a matter of whether or not we can get that format creative delivered to us. But those are some of the Facebook dynamic ad examples, obviously not all of them. And there were some formats that weren't available for this type of ad as well. Okay, Devin. We can go past this. That's a repeat. Now here, this is Facebook's breakdown of dynamic ad performance. Personally, I like the Facebook breakdown better because it doesn't just give you the reach, impressions, cost per result, or the amount spent. It gives you the cost per result. And that can be a really good indicator of what direction you need to go with future creatives. Obviously, the image that's converting at $5.46 isn't really as good as the one that's converting at 96 cents. Okay. So again, just demonstrating the value of getting this kind of data to make your marketing decisions with. And this is some more of it. This is the breakdowns by headlines and descriptions. You can see the, whoops, sorry, let me go back to that one for 1 second. Thank you. The line on the top is actually, in this case, is actually static ads, and the lines on the bottom are the dynamic ads. As you can see, we don't have a ton of impressions and data to run here, but they're starting out at a much better cost per result and delivery effect. All right.
All right, so this is where I come into the equation. My name is Devin. I am a content and SEO strategist at Over It. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about what Google RDA ads and Facebook dynamic ads kind of look like to a content person, and a little bit about what it looks like to someone who's, in design, and why it's beneficial for us as workers, but also beneficial to clients in terms of, most effectively using their time, getting better results, and just creating better content and design work that's more effective. So this is a little kind of breakdown of what Google RDA ads are specifically. I think Matt went over this pretty well. We have a series of headlines, descriptions, and images that are all through AI rotatable. The AI is able to basically take all of the different things you plug in and deploy them in different ways to determine which is most effective, which works best. Here I just have a little breakdown. This is the ad requirements if we have any copywriters out there. But this is just kind of the basic qualifications that go into actually creating the ad. So there are character limits and there are specific requirements and guidelines that are best practice. We don't need to go over that too much, but it's just a nice little thing to note for format purposes. So this was something that Matt, we're kind of going back to an old example. But what you can kind of see is you can see how, different copy and different imagery is being rotated in and out in different ways. And this is all done through the Google and the Facebook AI. So this means, we can take different pairings between a headline or a description or something that I wrote, and Google will pair it with different types of images and then basically kick back the results to us, and we can determine what's working best on the back end to kind of understand, okay, I wrote this headline, this description, it's being kind of rotated here, here, and here. This worked, this didn't. This can be a really great insight for someone who's creating content, because it can kind of tell you things used to kind of be a little bit more gut feeling, what you feel like is working, based on kind of long-term ads that are all the same. You have a static ad and that ad is being run, let's say, throughout a quarter. Okay, this one worked a little better than that one, so I'm going to go in this direction. With this RDA stuff, it gives me the opportunity to kind of, first of all, try a lot of different things, but also get like really direct feedback really pretty quickly and kind of make adjustments on the fly, and also make adjustments for the future, when you're talking about a client that you have for a long term. So for example, a retainer client, if in quarter one we saw particular language paired with particular imagery was effective, we can then kind of go into Q2 with those things in mind, kind of cater what we're writing to create even better content, better performing advertisements in the following quarter. So it's kind of this compound situation where you start the year, you start getting a lot of feedback, and then you can kind of grow and grow and grow each quarter, and then going into the following year. So it's this constant growth system that I think we weren't seeing as much with your conventional static ads. So that's how I've kind of seen RDAs be really effective for us. And this is just this is a nice illustration that Matt had pulled earlier in the presentation that kind of shows how all that work is kind of shuffling around. So yeah, but making content more flexible is the idea. And I could go into these really quickly. This is what a typical copy document would look like in the past, right? So we have these Facebook and Instagram static, carousel, all these different ads, all of them really delivering one message, right? All of them trying to focus on one specific thing. This would take, between 2 to 3 hours, and we would only be able to get so many messages through to the audience, and so that's what these used to look like. Now these newer documents that we're creating, they're a lot more kind of streamlined, and they give us way more opportunity to get a lot more messages across and test a lot more things. So I have a lot more headlines that are kind of approaching things from different perspectives, different angles. Some of them are just this is a pest control example. You go for the more just branded kind of element. Some of them are going for the more sort of like warm and fuzzy, we're going to help you out kind of stuff. And some of them are focusing on deals or expertise. But we can do all of that really in one campaign. Whereas before you'd be running multiple campaigns with kind of trying to focus on one specific message. So it's really like as they call it, it's a dynamic way for copywriters and content creators and designers to kind of test their ideas, get good feedback, and then actually execute on that feedback. So those are just, I don't know, a little like behind the scenes of what those look like. And then, as Matt kind of pointed to earlier, these are the performance results. So what's nice about this is I can go in after, we've had ads running for X amount of time. I can go in and I can actually see, okay, I really liked these two ideas, let's say, but I'm being told by the data, by the performance, that those two didn't do very well. So what does that mean? I can go in and I can look at what worked, what didn't, and change. We can make changes to headlines and descriptions, be it, during this campaign or, in a following quarter when we run another campaign. This is the kind of feedback that I was talking about a little bit earlier that really helps us make more effective content, and also kind of, use the time that we have allocated in a more effective way. So initially it might take me more time to create a series of ads, let's say at the beginning of a new campaign or the beginning of a new year. But if we have kind of compounding data that's constantly getting, more refined and better, and we're constantly getting more refined and better at interpreting and then deploying on that data, this kind of feedback is really good for me, but it's also really good for the client. It's good for the client's performance. It's good for the client getting the bang for their buck, right? So they're getting a lot more out of that time, that 2 to 3 hours, as opposed to what they used to be getting out of that 2 to 3 hours when we're talking about a series of static and carousel and all these different kind of formats of ads that still exist with RDA, but are done way more effectively now, and done in a way that the feedback is just a lot more conducive to results. So point being, I can jump in here, look at this, make a change, and that change is beneficial to the client and to me.
And we get to, and sometimes we'll collaborate on that too as well, Devin, which is great in being able to share it. Because when we were dealing in static formats, a lot of times we might look at a particular format and blame that as not being the conversion, not being a reason for converting. But the reality is now we're looking at the actual assets and breaking it down. And it provides opportunities when you have a business owner that's very interactive and has ideas of their own, to actually show them and test them and either validate or disprove those ideas. So it's just a lot more information than we're used to having in an area that we've always needed to be able to improve it.
Yeah, so it takes those sort of creative questions, that you get into in any industry, but I think in marketing, there's creative types, right? And everyone's kind of jockeying for what they think is right. This gives us the data to go, look, it was actually the copy that wasn't working on this, or, it actually was that image that wasn't performing that well. So let's make a change. So it kind of streamlines the process behind the scenes, and that leads to results. That's kind of how I view it. So this is kind of just what I was just talking about. And then I go a little bit into design. I'm not a designer, but these formats have, I think, a similar value to designers. Here you can kind of see, I know I don't have the actual photos here, but you can see these are all different assets. They're all different dimensions and different, not all of them are different pieces of content, but it's all these different assets. And again, it's spitting out this performance, indicator. So this is good, I think, for a designer, because a designer can look at something, maybe they created something really elaborate that they loved, but the reality is that wasn't effective on the customer or on the consumer. It can give a designer feedback to understand, okay, well, I might have really liked this design, but the reality is this other simpler, more straightforward design worked. So as much as I love this, I gotta let it go. And in the next round of things, I now know that's what I should focus on. I know for designers, talking internally to some of the design team, they've also talked about what's simpler is it's fewer. Often it's fewer assets. It's often less overall design work, which again means for the designer, they can get things done quicker and more efficiently. And for, the prospective business owner, they're getting a lot more kind of performance and, growth opportunity for what they're paying for the design work. So they're getting kind of more options in design work technically because of all the different dimension options that this tool has, without all that extreme extra time that could take, because these will resize. That's correct, right, Matt? These will resize largely.
They're resized to fit all the placements. So just like you're saying, typically the designer doesn't have to put in as many hours to get the content ready for delivery.
Right. Yep. And so that's pretty much what I have for my portion of this. I'm sure there will be questions from the audience. Matt, did you want to add anything before we open stuff up?
No, I think we're in pretty good shape. Do you want to just flip through the design aspect of this? The from the graphic designers, if there's any graphic designers in the audience, they might like to see that, the tail end of it.
Yes, give me 2 seconds here.
Yep. Do we not have that anymore?
We can pull it back in. That's okay.
Okay.
I just gotta.
Yeah, just go to the August 19th version on the left there.
That's right. All right. So this was a presentation that we had done with our designer. So I edited a little bit for this particular thing, but these are the design elements that our designer went into when we presented this.
And I brought it up just in case there's any graphic designers in the crowd and to think about the impact. The designer that put this together when we were talking about it said essentially ads like this are putting them out of business to a certain extent. And if it's just a matter of them using an artistic eye to source good photos, then maybe that's the case. But the longer reality is it's not really true. So we can move through this pretty quick. Here's a number of aspect ratios, and this is where the graphic designer always used to have to work hard to make sure they met them, and or specific image resolutions, which will go along with them. Next.
Yeah, and I just want to speak to, we're talking about, you're looking at, this could have been 10 to 15 different images that the designer had to take, resize, it took all this time. Now it's basically, there's 2 format options, which is obviously a lot less work for the designer.
Right.
So that's just
right. It's going to like 10 images to meet those 6 formats is going to take about an hour an image. And now it's just source me 10 images. So the cost saving there is pretty transparent.
Correct. Yeah. This is just kind of, again, this is really just like a best practice thing, blurry, don't use blurry photos, etc. Kind of going into that.
Yeah, more refinement of it. This is kind of great because this is where, and you saw in the video that I put in there where the logo gets moved around by the AI and placed into the image. So they don't, again, the designer doesn't have to take time to place logos and place them smartly, like upper right corner, bottom left. The AI is doing all that for us, a real time saver.
Overlaid text.
This is pretty obvious. We've got all the copy options that are going to be included with the ads, and there's a place for the text. That's why they don't need it overlaid. And in turn, a compelling graphic image is going to catch a person's eye more than one that's muddled with text. Right.
Button overlay, similar deal. So this is kind of a neat thing. I mean, make the product or service.
Yeah, this is good. I mean, this one's almost good graphic design, practice in general. But right. Again, it applied to the thinking for the images that you select for the photos.
They don't like collages.
Makes sense, especially if they're doing multiple images.
Composite. This is kind of interesting because I know this is something that we've talked about internally, is the idea of using actual photography. It seems like Google has a preference for that, correct?
Yeah, and AdWords, or excuse me, Facebook as well. In the dynamic format, they prefer the images. Facebook's been limiting text on ads for longer than AdWords already, in saying, we don't want good graphic, compelling images covered up with text or illustration. We want people to see that product, and then we'll bring the ad copy around it. So this is kind of Google adhering to that too.
And this is just some
Just
logo
breaking down what you do with the actual images. And this is pretty quick, just in uploading and setting up the ads. As you can see, this is Google branded. So this is actually part of their own creative best practice guide, and anybody can go out and grab that from Google as well, the latter part of this. I think that's much more in there.
That's what we got there.
Okay.
That's the design element.
Guys, well, we used the whole half hour there, but we're certainly happy to, open up the webinar to questions and answers if anybody has any. Feel free to select the Q&A on the bottom and drop any questions in there. Anyone? Okay. I think that's about a wrap. Devin? Oh, here we go.
Oh, is this a service we provide?
Is this a service you provide? I mean, I'll answer that. Devin can speak to it. Yes, we run dynamic ads on Facebook and AdWords for our clients now, and we are also a full service agency, so we provide video and graphic creative work as well.
Yeah, and so a lot of those examples we were pulling were actual examples of work we have done for clients in the past. So yeah, we do this pretty extensively. This is one of our main advertising kind of focuses right now.
Deanne, does that answer it for you, or was there something more specific about what we could do with them or for you? Great, thank you, Deanne.
Alex has a question.
All right. Any other social media sites offer a similar dynamic ad feature such as YouTube, Instagram, etc.? Well, Instagram advertisements are done through Facebook, so the dynamic ad creative does fill the placements on Instagram simultaneously to launching it on Facebook, unless we specify for a reason that we don't want to use those. I don't know if anybody caught it, but on the video I made of the Facebook ads, there's a couple placements where this doesn't fit specifically, just very few, but 2 of them, and that's on there. As of yet, I haven't seen Snap or LinkedIn or Twitter coming around with something like this, but I wouldn't be surprised. And YouTube is the video component of AdWords ads. And yes, you can use YouTube assets in AdWords ads. The difficulty is they're definitely going to show on YouTube, but they'll only show on certain AdWords partners that allow video content in order to run those assets. So if we are doing dynamic ads with video assets on AdWords, I would always insist that we have static image assets in the ad as well, so that we don't limit our ability to fill all the placements. And Devin, there's a Pest West question there. Do we also do geofencing? Yes, we do geofencing. We have partners that allow us to do geofencing, down to the feet or yard. And in instances where it's applicable, we'll use AdWords with 1 mile square delivery areas to geo-target specific regions. Okay. Alex, you had a follow-up to your question. Any success for dynamic ads with musicians, bands? Is this the strategy that worked for promoting a single album, etc.? I would think absolutely, particularly when you talk about being able to put video format in there. I mean, think about it. If you can put 4 for a band, if you could put 4 of their favorite live performances of a song or studio and recorded performances of a song in there, and people can get exposed to them. Yes, I think that's right up the alley of what makes these ads so good. If you think about it, think about somebody with a limited budget that throws out 5 static ads, and they do it in all 5 formats on AdWords, but they don't change it. So it's just this one ad. And think about you being the viewer. you see that ad for the fourth time, you're turning away from it within a couple milliseconds, a couple tenths of seconds, you're turning away from that ad. Whereas when you see something launched that you haven't seen before, you have a much higher likelihood of sticking around long enough to receive the message for the ad. Does that help, Alex? I mean, I think that it's a natural fit for it, but at this point, I personally haven't done a lot for musicians or bands. As Overit does quite a bit in that space, inevitably we will, I'm sure.
And we have a question for Deanne just commenting on looking to work geofencing into their marketing next year, I believe. I'm not sure. Deanne, are you referring to geofencing or are you referring to dynamic ads or both?
Dynamic. Yeah, Deanne, it's an excellent means to get the right message in front of the right audience, and you definitely should include it in your marketing plan. The one other, there's one element we didn't speak to too much that probably we should have, and that's responsive search ads. Think of it as the same way as the display ads, but you just have dynamic headlines and dynamic descriptions. And those two, they are purported to deliver results in 2x for click-through rates and 2 to 5x in conversions. So you have to put them into your marketing mix if you want to spend your money wisely. We have a few more minutes, guys. Any other thoughts or questions? I'm happy to answer them. Okay, guys, if that's about it, I think Devin and I are probably going to wrap this up and get back to work. Unfortunately.
We love it.
Thank you for attending, guys. We appreciate you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Bye.